Well, market reform was a large topic this week at the NCBA Convention and Trade Show. More than 6,000 producers and stakeholders attended the event, including a Canadian delegation. Well, host of Real Ag Radio, Shaun Haney, joins us now for a big perspective on that event. And Shaun, as always, thanks for your time here today. So what were those takeaways from the annual meeting?
Hey, Jenna, great to be with you here today. So I talked to Dennis Laycraft, Executive Vice President of the Canadian Cattlemen Association, who was down in Nashville for the meeting. And he talked about three things that were really focuses for them in discussing with some of their American and Mexican colleagues. One was discussing transparency in cattle pricing. Of course, that has taken up a lot of the cattle issue narrative in the last 12 months in terms of should there be more transparency? What does that look like? Are there consequences that are not intended for some of those changes? Obviously, there's a lot of legislation being pushed in the U.S. to make some changes on that. Obviously, they also talked about product of the USA label changes that potentially are coming down the pipe. NCBA has been definitely on this one. Of course, very much looking at how if some of that product of the USA moves into the discussion about country of origin labeling. And then also, Dennis talked to me about a big discussion in terms of the sustainability goals of both Canadian and American stakeholders. Of course, we have this UN Food Summit coming up in New York in the fall that the beef industry on all sides of the border have been really focused on being proactive about.
Shaun, how concerned is Canada about the product of the USA label, the changes that are currently being discussed?
Yeah, I would say watching very closely. And the reason is because if there is scope creep on the changes, then it could potentially move into what people like South Dakota Senator Mike Rounds are discussing, which is trying to figure out how to have mandatory country of origin labeling. And that's something that Canada has obviously pushed hard against. NCBA has pushed hard against it as well. So I would say in terms of the product of the USA changes, Canada is following very, very closely.
And Shaun, is price transparency a major issue in Canada as well, like it is here?
So, yes, it is. Not only the beef sector, the pork sector, the grain sector in Canada really pushing for better transparency on data, not just prices, but just overall, comparing a lot to what data and information is available in the U.S. to producers. Now, on the beef side, though, just following very, very closely what potential changes the U.S. would make. Of course, we have two major packers in Canada that kill the bulk of the cattle. So it's a little bit more difficult, I guess, to make some of the changes that are being talked about in the U.S., but following it very closely because it's a North American market, and some of those things could potentially move north of the border as well. So watching very, very closely what changes are made, if any.
All right, Shaun, as always, thanks for your time here this morning. Of course, you can catch Shaun on his show, Real Ag Radio. That airs at 4:30 p.m. Eastern weekdays on Rural Radio 147 on Sirius XM. We'll chat with him again Monday morning.